David Carter was born in a forgotten corner of the city. His family lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment where the walls were thin and hope was even thinner. His parents worked long hours for low wages. His mother folded laundry in a hotel, and his father repaired old cars in a dusty neighborhood garage. They didn't have much, but they gave all they could. From a young age, David saw the world a little differently. While other kids played with toys, he played with dreams. He would lie on his back on the old cracked rooftop, staring up at the sky, thinking about who he wanted to be. He didn't want luxury. He didn't want fame. He wanted something greater, something with meaning. He wanted to build things, to fix things, to create a better life, not just for himself, but for his parents, for his future family, and for anyone who felt forgotten like him. There were nights when the electricity went out and the only light in the room was a candle sitting on a stack of old school books. There were days when his lunch was just a piece of bread. But David never complained. He never said, "Oh, why me?" Instead, he whispered to himself, "Someday I'll change this." You see, humble beginnings don't decide where you're allowed to go. Just because you start small doesn't mean you stay small. David understood that. He knew he had two choices: accept the life he was given or fight for the life he wanted, and he chose to fight. He woke up before the sun and studied before school. He worked part-time jobs after class, cleaned stores on weekends, and still found time to read every book he could find. He taught himself to stay focused when his friends gave up. He taught himself to believe when there was no one else around to cheer him on. People often say the American dream is just a myth, but David didn't see it that way. He saw it as a challenge, a mountain worth climbing. Even if the peak looked far away, the dream became his fuel. It gave him a reason to keep going when everything told him to stop. He didn't have mentors, he didn't have connections, but he had something powerful. He had a vision. And the power of that dream kept him grounded, yet lifted him higher every day. When others told him he would never make it, he nodded politely, then went back to work. When life threw obstacles in his path, he used them as stepping stones. His dream was not a fantasy. It was a promise he made to himself. One cold night, while helping his father fix a broken engine, David looked at his dad's oil-stained hands and tired eyes. At that moment, something changed. He made a silent vow. "One day, you won't have to work like this. One day, I'll take care of you." That promise became his mission. He didn't dream of escaping his past. He dreamed of transforming it. That's the difference between wishing and believing. Wishing fades, believing fights, and David believed with all his heart. So every test he passed, every book he read, every hour he spent working after school, it was all part of a plan. A plan born not out of privilege, but out of persistence. A plan born from the belief that no matter where you start, greatness is still possible. The American dream isn't just about money or success. It's about hope. It's about the courage to see more for yourself when the world shows you less. David didn't just chase the dream, he carried it with him. In every step, in every sacrifice, he proved that even the smallest beginnings can lead to the biggest victory. David Carter didn't have much, but what he had, he used. His strength wasn't in talent or wealth or connections. His strength was in how hard he worked. While others waited for luck, David built habits. While others looked for shortcuts, David took the long road step by step every single day. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the smartest, but he was the most determined. Every morning before school, while the city was still asleep, David woke up to review his notes. He memorized equations with tired eyes. He practiced essays by the dim light of the kitchen. And when the sun came up, he walked to school with a quiet focus burning in his chest. There were times when his classmates would laugh at him for being too serious. They'd tease him for staying after class, for asking too many questions, for caring too much. But David never let it bother him. He knew something they didn't know. He knew that the life he wanted wasn't going to be handed to him. He had to earn it. While his friends spent their afternoons playing games or wasting time, David was stacking shelves in a grocery store. While others went out late, David stayed home and studied. He didn't see it as sacrifice. He saw it as investment. He believed that every late night, every early morning, every small decision mattered. There were nights when he felt exhausted, when the weight of everything felt too heavy. There were moments when his hands shook from working too long. and his eyes stung from staring at books. But still, he kept going. He reminded himself why he started. He remembered his parents working long hours so he could have a chance. He remembered the promise he made to create a life of dignity, of freedom, of purpose. And when he wanted to quit, he thought of the dream. Not just any dream, but his dream. The dream that had followed him from that cracked rooftop to this very moment. Education was his ladder. Not just to success, but to self-respect, to confidence, to the power of making his own choices. He read everything he could. Science, math, history, biographies. He didn't just learn facts. He learned how to think, how to question, how to imagine. Every page turned was a brick laid in the foundation of his future. He believed that knowledge was his weapon, and he was building an arsenal. People around him started to notice. Teachers offered help. Neighbors offered encouragement. And even though he still faced struggle, a small circle of support began to form around him. But even support could not protect him from the adversity that waited. There were still times when life tried to break him, times when the money wasn't enough, times when people judged him for his background, times when failure knocked on his door and he had to answer it. One day, during his final year of high school, David applied for a scholarship. He worked hard on the essay. He poured his heart into every word. He stayed up for 3 nights straight, perfecting each sentence, rewriting every line. When the rejection letter came, it felt like a punch to the chest. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at the paper, his dream trembling. For a moment, he felt like giving up. But then he remembered something his father once said while fixing a broken car engine. His father looked at the busted part and said, sometimes it takes more than one try to get things running. That simple line stayed with David. He folded the rejection letter, put it away, and applied again to 5 more scholarships, then 10. He failed again, but he kept going. He failed again, but he kept believing, because that's what adversity does. It tests you, it shakes you, it tries to make you forget who you are. But David didn't forget. He got stronger. He started to see that pain wasn't his enemy, it was his teacher. When he was laughed at, he learned humility. When he was told no, he learned patience. When things broke, he learned how to build. And slowly the tide began to turn. He won one small scholarship, then another. A local program offered a grant. A teacher helped him connect with a mentor. And piece by piece, the door started opening. He didn't burst into success overnight. He climbed his way there, one hand, one foot, one breath at a time. Resilience, he discovered, wasn't about being tough. It was about standing back up after life knocked you down. It was about continuing, even when everything inside you begged you to stop. It was about holding on to your dream, not just when it felt possible, but especially when it didn't. David's journey wasn't smooth. It was filled with cracks and storms. But each time he stumbled, he stood back up, not weaker but wiser. He carried his scars with pride, knowing each one told a story of survival. He learned how to be still in the middle of chaos, how to listen when the world shouted, how to stay true to his purpose when everything seemed against him. And through it all, he never lost his belief. Not just belief in himself, but belief in the idea that no matter how dark the path looked, there was light at the end. He believed that effort matters, that character matters, that dreams, real dreams, belong to anyone willing to work for them. David Carter didn't have a head start, but he had a heart that never stopped. And in the end, that made all the difference. David Carter never walked his path alone, even though it often felt like it. At first, the support was small. A kind neighbor who let him borrow an old laptop, a teacher who stayed after school just to help him understand one more math problem, a librarian who made sure he had a quiet space to study when his home was too loud. Each act of kindness was a spark that lit a fire inside him. Support doesn't always come in big, loud ways. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it comes from people you barely know. And sometimes it comes from within, your own voice saying, you can do this when no one else does. David began to realize that he didn't have to carry everything by himself. He learned to ask for help, not out of weakness, but out of strength. It takes courage to admit when you're struggling. It takes wisdom to accept guidance when it's offered. He found mentors, people who had once been in his shoes, people who had made it through their own storms and wanted to help someone else find the way. They didn't give him shortcuts. They gave him something better: perspective, encouragement, and accountability. With their help, David discovered how powerful community could be. When people believe in you, even just a little, it becomes easier to believe in yourself. Their support didn't do the work for him, but it reminded him why the work mattered. And still, David understood that belief was not enough. He needed discipline. He needed consistency. He needed to show up again and again, even on the days he didn't feel like it. While others were distracted, David stayed focused. While others gave 50%, David gave 100. Every test, every project, every shift at work. He didn't do it for praise. He didn't do it for attention. He did it because he had a goal, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him from reaching it. Success isn't about one big moment. It's built in the quiet hours when no one is watching. It's built in the choice to study when you're tired, the choice to keep going when it feels like you're moving in slow motion. David made those choices every day. He believed in the power of small steps. Because small steps taken consistently can take you farther than a giant leap taken once. When he didn't feel motivated, he leaned on discipline. When he didn't feel strong, he leaned on routine. He made a habit of showing up, not just for the world, but for himself. He kept a calendar with daily goals. He wrote his dreams on sticky notes and placed them on his bedroom wall, not as decorations, but as reminders. Reminders of what he was fighting for, reminders of who he wanted to become. And slowly the results began to show. His grades improved. His mind became sharper. His confidence grew. What started as a whisper of hope inside him had become a voice, calm, clear, and steady. He no longer wondered if he could do it. He started asking what's next, and then something amazing happened. David, the quiet boy from the struggling neighborhood, became a symbol of what was possible. His story began to spread in his school, then in his community. Younger students came up to him and asked, "How did you do it?" He didn't talk about luck. He didn't talk about talent. He talked about hard work, about faith, about never giving up. One day, his high school invited him to speak to a group of younger students. Nervous but determined, David stood in front of the crowd and told them the truth. He told them how hard it was, how many times he failed, how many nights he cried, but he also told them how he made it through. He looked them in the eye and said, "I was just like you. If I can do this, so can you. Can you?" That was the moment David realized something important. He hadn't just been climbing for himself. He was climbing for others too. He remembered what it felt like to feel invisible, to feel forgotten, and he made a decision right there. He wouldn't let others feel that way if he could help it. So he started mentoring. He started tutoring. He gave his time, his attention, and his story, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because giving back made everything he had gone through worth it. Helping someone else find their light became one of the most powerful parts of his journey. You see, success doesn't mean much if you keep it to yourself. Real success is about lifting others as you climb. David wasn't rich yet. He wasn't famous, but he had something more valuable. He had influence, and he used it to help others believe in themselves, just like others once helped him. He became proof that the American dream wasn't dead. It was alive, breathing, and growing stronger in every person willing to work, to believe, and to rise above. David Carter's journey wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it became a light for many who needed hope, not because he had everything, but because he made something out of nothing, and then he turned around and helped someone else do the same. David Carter had come a long way from that small, broken apartment where his journey began. He had overcome struggle, poverty, rejection, and doubt. But even now, with success within reach, he didn't slow down. He kept moving forward. Because for David, reaching his goals wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning of a new one. The dream that once lived in his heart had now become real. He graduated from college with honors. He received job offers from companies he once only read about in magazines. He chose to work for a company that built sustainable homes for low-income families, not because it paid the most, but because it meant something. He wanted his work to have purpose. He wanted every hour, every effort to mean something more than a paycheck. David never forgot where he came from. And because of that, he walked through life with gratitude in his chest and fire in his steps. He woke up every morning not thinking, "What can I get?" but "What can I give?" But what can I give? That mindset became his greatest strength. His focus shifted from success to significance. He wanted to be someone who made life better for others. Every house he helped design, every community he helped build reminded him of the promise he once made to his father that one day people like them would live in warmth, in dignity, and in hope. And he kept that promise. He built a home for his parents, not just a house, but a place filled with love, comfort, and peace. The first night they spent there, David sat on the porch with his father watching the stars. His father placed a hand on his shoulder and simply said, "You did it." But David knew this wasn't about just him doing it. It was about everyone who believed. It was about all the moments that tested and shaped him and taught him who he really was. And now it was his turn to inspire the next generation. He began speaking at schools, community centers, even prisons, anywhere people needed hope. He didn't talk like a superhero. He spoke like a neighbor, a brother, a son, someone who had been through the fire and made it out stronger. He told his story not to impress people, but to remind them, you're not alone. David believed that the greatest legacy is not what you leave behind, but who you lift along the way. And so he lifted. With every talk, every handshake, every word of encouragement, he passed the torch to the boy who thought he was too poor, to the girl who thought she wasn't good enough, to the man who had fallen, to the woman who had been forgotten. He showed them all that dreams are still alive, that resilience matters, that kindness matters, that belief, especially in the darkest times, can carry you to the brightest places. David Carter lived his life with open hands and an open heart. He didn't chase applause. He chased impact. And in the quiet moments when the world slowed down and no one was watching, he smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because he had become the person he always dreamed of being. And in doing so, he gave others permission to dream too. That is the power of never giving up. That is the power of believing. That is the power of the human spirit. And that truly is the power of the American dream.